tuli ne Joel Ssenyonyi wano Washington DC mu America mu lukuŋŋaano lwa National Unity Platform NUP Diaspora Convention 2023. Joel Ssenyonyi ayogerako eri banna diaspora abakuŋŋaanye mu lukuŋŋaana luno mu maaso ga President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine ku bigenda maaso mu Parliament ku nsonga za kkosasi ez'okukwata ababbi. Ababbi bakwata bituuseewa. Ababbi bakwata babulirawa, ababbi bakwata basibibwawa, ababbi bakwata balikangavvulwa ddi. Ebyo n'ebirala bingi Joel Ssenyonyi byagenda okwogerako olwaleero wano mu Diaspora National Unity Platform Convention 2023. Waliwo n'ensonga endala nnyingi ezigenda mu maaso mu ggwanga Uganda ku kiki tulina okukola nga ffe bannayuganda okulaba nga tufuna obukulembeze bw'eggwanga Uganda, okulaba nga tufuna Uganda empya, Uganda ennungi gye tuneeyagaliramu na gye tuleekamu abaana baffe nabo ne bagyeyagaliramu. Kale nkusaba onneegatteko n'obwombefu obw'ekika ekyawaggulu tugende mu lukuŋŋaana lwa National Unity Platform Diaspora Convention 2023 tufune ebigambo bya Joel Ssenyonyi abitugambe nga ye omwogezi w'ekibiina kya National Unity Platform. Mu convention tufunamu ki egenda tugattako ki era biki gwe munnayuganda by'oba osuubira okuvaayo nga Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine asisinkanye bannayuganda bali mu diaspora.
And my name is Joel Ssenyonyi. I represent the people of Nakawa West in Parliament and Chairperson Kosase. Kosase Mujidi. Tulwanagana obusajja eyo naye ssebo. Naye tujja bulemerako paka. We are delighted to be here. I'll make a few remarks and then I'll invite our president to address us. Kosase Mujidi. Tulwanagana obusajja eyo naye ssebo. Naye tujja bulemerako paka. We are delighted to be here. I'll make a few remarks and then I'll invite our president to address us. We want to firstly appreciate our leadership, our diaspora leadership, the team headed by Dr. Daniel Kauma and the rest of everybody. Thank you for exhibiting leadership. It's tough leading adults, it's tough leading leaders. And so I want to appreciate you. Want to thank you too, our diaspora team, for making it easy on them. But most importantly, for being desirous for change. You know, it's one thing to be where you are and live your life. There's many people in the diaspora who say, you know what, we left Uganda and all its confusion, let's start a life. And they started a life wherever they are. They don't want anything to do with Uganda. And to an extent, you might not blame them because they went through hell and back. And they said, you know what, let's forget about that country. But you have said, look, even though we moved to wherever we did, some of you acquired citizenship this side, you're saying Uganda is still home and you'll do everything in your power to see that home gets better. And so we don't take this for granted, that you'll travel from wherever you've traveled. You've come from different states. I've met people who came from Germany. There's a lady I saw from Germany. There are people that have come from UK, far and wide, and you have said, let's take off time, work and our busy schedules to come. Not just to be happy, but because there's a cause before us and we must pursue that cause. And so I want to appreciate you and all the organizers for this convention. In 1985, my father was dating my mother. And he left the country for a short course, I forget which country. And while there, chaos broke out in Uganda. And so he called my mother. They had these landlines, some of these places, and said, you know, I cannot return to Uganda because we shall die there. So let me organize papers for you. You come and join me in the country he was. I forget which country it was. And so as they were in the process of working out the papers, January 1986, Museveni took power. And there was a semblance of sanity. People thought it was Uhuru. And so my father called my mother and said, you know, now there is peace and tranquility in Uganda. You don't need to join me. Let me come back home. So my father returned February or March, thereabout. And I was born in December of that very year. So when I was born in December of 1986, now you can calculate my age. My father told my mother, let's name this our son after this hero who made it possible for me to return home. And so, my father wanted me to be named Yoweri. My mother was very foresighted. She put up a challenge. She said, but you see, this name Yoweri might give our child trouble in time to come. So she said no. And they had a fight about it. I was about, what, a week or so old, and so they were battling about naming me. My father put down his foot. My mother put down her foot. Eventually they came to a middle ground of sorts. And so my mother said, okay, what I can accept, what is palatable, is that we name this our son. We give him the English version of the name Yoweri. And so that's how I get to be Joel. And so I grew up knowing I was named after a hero. Yes. But you see, as sanity came over me, and as this hero after whom I was named became a shadow of his former past, I said, now, I must do everything I can to redeem my name. And little wonder, I am now fighting together with the rest of you to unseat this man after whom I was named. So for me, it is personal. I've got to redeem my name. And I hope that we wake up to reality, to realize that our children and our grandchildren might someday ask us, but Papa, Mama, what were you up to when this was bedeviling our country? Somebody once said that Africa has three major challenges, three major problems. The first one is leadership. The second is leadership. The third is leadership. I thought about it, and I eventually agreed with this person. Because I tell you what, as John Maxwell once said, everything rises and falls on leadership. That's a reality. And I think it's the same man who once said that, it was a Ghanaian professor, Professor Steve Adey, who said leadership is cause, everything else is effect. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that everything, good or bad, revolves around leadership. Whether you like it or you don't like it. It's a reality. Everything has a connection to leadership. You people are here in a country whose systems work. It took leadership for those systems to be built. Somebody was telling us about George Washington, who said, "I'll not do anything more than 2 years." And so a precedent was set. It took leadership. You know, even Museveni, whom we are fighting today, he properly diagnosed our problem in 1986, shortly after he took power. He said the problem of Africa, and Uganda in particular, are leaders who overstay in power. He was right, damn right. And then he became that problem. Because you see, good as he did set out, Mr. Museveni's preoccupation now is survival. And that's why some of us are saying we must do everything within our powers to see this man out. Because you see, he cannot change. He cannot get any better. His preoccupation now is how to keep in power. That means everything else will suffer. Everything will suffer. Most of the money will be channeled to how do I keep myself in power. There will be little that will go to healthcare, education, and all these other areas and sectors. How do I keep myself in power? That's his preoccupation. They will not buy ambulances, but they will buy military tankers to come after us. Because the preoccupation is to retain power. And so, you know, we talk about this thing called struggle, and sometimes you say it in passing, but I hope we can wake up to realizing what it really means and what we are up against. I am going to briefly share the status back home and what it is that we must do. But even more importantly, somebody did ask a lady yesterday, what will our first 100 days look like? Because that's important. What do we do different? Because we must be a credible alternative. And it's important that we think about that. So there are people who have accused us of being preoccupied with the removal of Mr. Museveni. And yes, we must be. Because that's the major problem that we have. Nothing else will work. We can speak all the English we can. I sit in parliament, and oh boy, we speak some English. We can have all these policy formulations in place and so on, but until we deal with that problem, none of this gets to happen. And so I'm never shy to say, I wake up thinking, planning, how do we remove this man? That's important. Because of some of the issues I'm going to talk about and what we are going to do different when we take power. Not if we take power, when we take power. It's a matter of time. Number one, power must return to the people. We are people power. It was deliberate how we coined this. People power. Our power, we the people, our power. It was deliberate. Because you see, Mr. Museveni emasculated all of us Ugandans. He took the power away from us. People will go and cast their ballot and decide this is the person who wants to rule us, and he will say no. Why? Because he took that power away from us. That power must return to the people. We were in Kayunga. You know, a couple of by-elections, you know, and along the way I'll talk a bit about 2021. But you see, we would go to by-elections and they would rig and they would abduct our people and so on. But in Kayunga, he said, you know what? I don't want to stress myself abducting their agents and so on. Let their person win. We shall declare what we want. And look, we have all the DR forms that show that our candidate won, the LC5 chairperson, Harriet Nakwede. But they said, we shall do what we want, do what you want. Because it took the power away from us as a people. That power, that's our major aim. That power must return to the people. That those people get to decide who leads them, how they lead them. And that means, God forbid, if we become a mess when we are in charge, those same people have the power to boot us out. That's the place we must get to. And so we've got to empower the people, that they get to determine. I want to talk a little about corruption. You know, we talk about this thing called corruption, and it has become so normalized. I chair a committee in Parliament called COSASE. You know, when I was a journalist for 14 years, from 2006, with the Moses and others. I saw Bahati somewhere. And so we used to, yes, of course, do stories about corruption and so on. And it's different when you are on the sideline. But now, I stare this thing in the face every single day, and I just cannot believe it. Almost every institution in our country is riddled with corruption. I'll just give you some pointers. We investigated Uganda Airlines. A number of you saw how that probe went. People wanted to finish me because I was unraveling the rot there was. They said, I'm doing my job and I'll keep doing it. We handled Uganda Railways Corporation. And these guys bought locomotives. One, they bought older locomotives than what they should have, because the guys that did the surveying said, let's buy 6-year-old locomotives at 36 billion. These people went and bought 8-year-old locomotives at 48 billion using direct procurement, and the things could not work when they got them back home. And so we dug all these things up, and there are people in government who said, this Ssenyonyi here, he's anti-Museveni, he just wants to make the government look bad. I said, do your own probe. Here is our report, you know. And eventually they established there was a problem. The MD was fired, the board was fired, but I said, that's not enough. I want those guys locked up. It's not enough for you to fire them and excite me. Lock them up, let them pay, and fire them again, as somebody's saying. We recently inquired into KCCA. So, one of course, there's many things. You know, they've sold off property belonging to the entity and so on. There's land in Ssenyonyi. You guys know Ssenyonyi. So, they were planning to buy 10 acres of land in Ssenyonyi for vendors to put them there. And guess how much they wanted to buy this land? Each acre was to be bought, each acre, at $10 million. Ssenyonyi. You know Ssenyonyi? And by the way, most of this land, because I went to the land, I said, I want to understand this land, what is it made of? So they wanted to buy 10 acres at $100 million. So I said, let's go and see this land. I want to know what is underneath it. Is there some gold or I don't know what? We went, and most of it is even wetland and so on. But you see, it's because somebody was trying to crack this as a deal, and so they're agreeing with the vendor of the land. This person has a share off of it. They don't care that this is money that could do many other things. No, it's a deal for them. And so we stepped in their deal. And I keep having trouble back home. You know, my wife, each time I leave the house, she says, you have gone again. May God bring you back safe. Because it is tough. But you know, you think about these things and you think, but surely. We investigated Uganda Land Commission, and what these people did you know, they go to a village and they acquire title and they say, now we have title for this square mile or that kind of thing. So all of you, we've given you 1 week to vacate. And so it's a cartel. So then some people within government say, no, don't chase the people off the land. Let's pay you for the title. So that now those people retain their land. But then something just didn't make sense. And so we began to scratch a little more. And they had acquired letters of administration. But the letters of administration were forged. So I saw a signature of a judge. I called the judge. I say, Your Lordship, I have this document. I just want to be sure you're the one who signed this. He said, send it to me. I sent it to him. He said, 2 problems. Number 1, that's not my signature. Number 2, they signed that document after I had long retired from the judiciary. So I said, now I have these thieves. Of course, with the back and forth, we got that title cancelled. But I've been saying, now that title was cancelled. Those guys were paid billions of shillings for that land. I said, now we have successfully showed that this was acquired fraudulently. We want those guys to pay back that money and to get locked up. And that's the back and forth we're having. I can go on and on. Some of you probably followed UNBS recently, where we had evidence that an executive director was bribing board members to retain his job. So I acquired screenshots. I tend to use my journalistic background. And somehow we trapped him and he said the truth. That's just an example. I'm sharing this because that's a space in which I am. I'm not telling you so that you say I'm doing a very good job. It is not even a drop in the ocean, yeah? In all honesty, I need to be humble to accept that. But that's just to show you the road there is in our country and why you and I must fight. Uganda has got plenty of money. Somebody did mention here, we don't need aid. I read a book, a little book called Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo. You should read that book. It goes to show how much aid has been pumped into Africa for so many years. And Africa remains poor, despite the aid that is pumped there. As a country, Uganda, we are a heavily indebted, poor country. Forget this nonsense they tell you at our GDP is now, our economy is sui and all of that rubbish. We are a heavily indebted, poor country. You know this. You have relatives back home. But why? Because what we should be able to use to salvage our country, it is stolen. And you see, corruption is the glue that keeps our government intact. And Museveni knows that. That's why he told the IGG, leave my thieves alone. After all, they're investing in Uganda, they're building shopping malls. Imagine that nonsense. Imagine. So whose shopping malls do they belong to? But saying, no, they are investing back in Uganda. Is that a national asset? And so the IGG will not go after them. When I was still in the media, under Nation Media Group, NTV, we did an interview with the then IGG, Justice Mulyagonja. And we said, but you see, you always go after the small fish. Why not the big ones? And she said, and that headline eventually made rounds and got her in trouble. She said, you see, whenever I go after the big fish, I find them hiding behind the president. And so she cannot touch them. So this whole drama you hear, zero tolerance to corruption, there's a time they did a march in town, you know, from Coral to I don't know where to fight corruption. I said, you guys, the only benefit there is in that walk is that you'll cut a bit of weight. There's no benefit beyond that. And so you and I must fight. Corrupt people must be locked up. That's our intention. And by the way, I don't care that you have been part of the struggle with us. Tomorrow we are in charge, you're a thief, we lock you up. Because otherwise then we shall not be different from him. Because the people he fought with in the bush, they are thieves and he retains them. Jim Muhwezi, Otafire, that one stole timber, gold in Congo. It's numerous examples. But because they were his comrades in the struggle, he cannot let them go. We must be different. And so I hope you're not part of this struggle because you're hoping to benefit at some point. Institutions in our country got emasculated a long time ago. We have an institution called Museveni. And that's why institutions just struggle to function. Look at the judiciary. And I have immense respect for judges and so on. I'm a lawyer. But you see, every institution is under capture. You saw what happened to Justice Chisache, who was saying, I have a different opinion. And she's entitled to that. But she's been treated so terribly because of that, her opinion. In as far as our petition is concerned. You see, when I was in the media, I interviewed Kale Kayihura. And I saw a guy who had this bravado, a guy who thought he had it together. He thought he was in charge. Kayihura fell out with the powers that be, and he was locked up. Kayihura, his lawyer, Eli Karuhanga, he made a plea to the head of the General Court Martial. And he said, my lord, my client has been detained for longer than the requisite 48 hours. He needs to go home and meet his family. I said, this Kayihura here is the one who was advocating for the banning of the 48-hour rule. He was holding people longer than he should have. Now, when he needed that principle of the law to work for him, it was not in place because he had decimated it. That's what you and I have got to fix. Because you see, once institutions are functional, then you know tomorrow you'll be safe. But if you break down those institutions, those key principles, you'll need them tomorrow and they just cannot work for you. You remember Mbabas, the man pushed and pushed through this Public Order Management Act. Who was the first victim? Himself. I don't know if these guys think or maybe they don't about these things. We must fix institutions. Because you see, institutions get to outlive us. But also, the beauty about institutions that are strong and firm, even when you have a hopeless leader, that hopeless leader will not overrun the institutions. And that's what we admire about countries like this one and others. Because you know, even when you have a president in charge who will do all manner of crazy things, the institutions are intact and they will not allow that leader to mess up the country. I don't want to give examples, but I'm sure you're thinking about some. That's what must happen back home. That you have institutions that function. That as a leader, totalitarian as you might be, you cannot find your way around the institutions. We must fix that. We must return power to institutions. That's when a country gets to function. Many times we have a chat with our leader, and it's good he mentions it, and we remind him. He keeps telling us, guys, I don't want to become another Museveni. And I tell him, we are not going to allow you to become another Museveni. And it's good it firstly comes from him. Because otherwise then we shall be washing and then we hang in the dirt. We must not do that. I want to talk a bit about some of our sectors in our country and the challenge there is. Healthcare. In 2016, it was 2011, when campaigning, Mr. Museveni promised an ambulance system. You remember? To date, that has not happened and it will not happen until tomorrow. The ambulances in the country are bought by us political leaders. And you remember during COVID, they said, MPs help us with your ambulances. I said, now, what kind of government is this for sure? 2016, he promised sanitary towels, pads for girls. You remember? Until tomorrow, they will not come. They will not. Because that's not his preoccupation. His preoccupation is, how do I retain power? Sometimes we try and do a few things. The other day, I was taking pads to reusable sanitary towels. I partnered with some friends, and so we're taking them to one of the ghettos that I have in my constituency. Many young people, when they reach that time of the month, these girls drop out of school because she cannot mingle with the others. So she'll be away for a week or so. It is true. Others are not even lucky to eventually go back after that. This is not a sickness, it is nature. But that a girl will drop out of school simply because she cannot have sanitary towel. And so when we took them there, police comes and says, the IGP has not allowed you to give out pads. I said, look at these idiots. Forgive my French. But I got so angry that day. I said, and that's where we are. Mothers give birth on the floor. Munange, this is the reality. I hope you don't think we make these things up. Anyway, you have relatives back home. They probably tell you. On the floor. And somehow we imagine we are securing their future. A few weeks ago, water was cut off Nakuru Hospital. They were going from Lago, Hoima Hospital and others. Why? Because they owed money. And so water was cut off. Can you imagine water being cut off a hospital for 1 week? Just think about it. I interacted with the doctors. They said now we have closed the theater because we shall be giving people more disease than we are trying to deal with. Because how does a hospital function without water? How does a hospital function without electricity? Those should be priorities. They are not. And so we must think about what is of importance. You know, this regime, well, this, I'm trying to imagine we are in Uganda, yeah? It ridicules Amin, Obote, and so on. But there's some good things when you think about it. Yeah, there's lots of evil they did. I lost relatives, some relatives, to the Amin regime. But see, Amin, all his known 9 children, underline the word known, were born at Mulago Hospital. When Mr. Museveni's daughter was going to give birth, he put her on the presidential jet, flew her to Germany, not on his money, on taxpayer money. The people that did that story then, one of them now, by the way, works with Mr. Museveni, Linda Nausai. She's, I think, deputy PPS or something. And he said he will pay that money back in the coffers until tomorrow. Obote was shot at Lugogo in the mouth. There was an assassination attempt on him. He was taken to Mulago, treated until he got fined. Does that happen today? Why? Because healthcare is not a priority. These guys think, if I can get it elsewhere, why should I bother dealing with the situation back at home? But Obote, I mean, with all their badness, their evil, as portrayed by this regime especially, there's some things they did. Some of the infrastructure we still celebrate in the country was built by these guys. That's the reality. Today, they are excited they are building roads. You see these roads, by the way. One of the other issues we looked into, the cost of a road per kilometer, some of these roads are 15 billion per kilometer. What kind of road is that? And then, 3 months later, that road will have potholes. And this is money, by the way, that was borrowed from China or wherever else. You and I and our children and grandchildren have got to pay that money. And so he's telling you how we built infrastructure, at what cost? 3/4 of the cost of that road is stolen. And we have got to pay it back. And they're screaming infrastructure. And so we have got to fix healthcare. We normally, each time there's a budget, we produce our alternative budget. And we show where we think money should go. We know they'll not act on it, but it's okay to have it on record. And healthcare is one of those that we think are important. Education. UPE, on an annual basis, they avail about 11,000 shillings per child, capitation grant, UPE, 11,000 shillings per child per year. Not per term, per year. That's about $3. Tell me something. How is that child supposed to grow up and compete with the rest of the world? You're educating them at $3 per year. How? That's $1 per term. How? And by the way, this is a reality, yeah? Those who do research, I don't want you to take my word for it. How? And they're supposed to compete with the child in the US, in China, in UK. How? When I was still in the media, we did a story, went to this school somewhere in eastern Uganda, and the children were writing on the ground, in the soil, and the teacher would come and mark them in that soil. And they are securing the future. We must change that. It's not enough for us to fight for the rights of the people of Uganda and all of these different things, fix democracy. The foundation of these young people has got to be dealt with. And so education, it's like saying we must put our money where our mouth is. That's part of our priority. You know, people keep asking, so you guys keep talking about all these grand plans. We promised the soldiers and police officers we shall pay you better and so on. Where is that money going to come from? Every year, do you know how much money goes to classified budget? For a period of about 3-4 years, classified was about 3 trillion shillings per year. This is classified. Now, every country has got a classified budget, but it should be justifiable, it should make sense. We are not at war. Where we are at war, like in Congo, there's a separate budget. The Congo War, there's a separate budget for that. In Somalia, it's not even us paying for that. So these trillions in classified, what do they do? Your guess is as good as mine. We have a high wage bill, and these are things we must fix. We have nearly 90 ministers, hundreds of RDCs and their deputies, hundreds of presidential advisors who the president is the one who advises them when they get a chance to meet him. When I was in the media, we did an interview with some of them, and he's the one who told us very bluntly, I've spent 4 years without meeting him to advise him, but I earn my monthly salary and allowances. I sit in parliament. We have a huge and unnecessarily huge parliament. I'm not afraid to say that. We are 500 plus. On a day when we all show up, people are sitting on each other's laps. And I don't know. You see, if there was a correlation between a high number of MPs and development, it's okay, we can even have 1 million MPs. But how many MPs do you know? You think about it, you as an individual. How many? Because that goes to show you how much value we are adding as 500 plus MPs. Our government has got to bite the bullet and fix some of these issues. Deliberately, I'm wrapping up. Let me talk a bit about the economy. As a country, we import twice as much as we export. Do you guys know the Ginger Road all the way to the border? Try and recall that road. Let me show you the economics of our country. So when you see that road, the side of the road that is coming into the country, it dipped in. I'm talking about Ginger Road that goes all the way to the border. One side fell in, caved in, the other is still fairly intact. The one that caved in is the one coming into the country. You know why? Because these trucks, these lorries come when they are full. So they are heavy on the road. When they are going out, there is very little, if anything, therein. You ask your relatives, those who can take pictures for you about that road. It will show you our economics as a country. We decided that we shall focus more on foreign investors. They come, we give them a red carpet, tax waiver. We are giving them free land. Of late, we are guaranteeing them money. What kind of investor are you? If you're coming, I'm giving you free land, tax waivers, and money. You remember the Lobowa Hospital? And yet we have our local investors that we must focus on so that we empower them. That way you'll be able to produce a lot more. 60% of Ugandan businesses don't live up to their first birthday. Why? Because the government does not care about them. China is a big economic power. Why? Because they realized our small and medium enterprises, those are the ones we must focus on. So they are empowered. Tax waivers. And that's why you go to every country in this world, you find Chinese products. How many of your products are in which countries? You Ugandans. We must deal with that. Tourism. Somebody here talked about tourism. A potential foreign exchange earner for our country. When Chiwanda Subi was still a Minister of State for Tourism, there are tourists that got stuck. They were going to one of the national parks. The roads are terrible. They got stuck for a day and a half. This man, while addressing the nation, he said, you see, as people were condemning that whole thing, yeah? He said, that's part of the tourism experience. I said, Kationu yasomera wa baba yasoma. A tourist has got 3 days they've taken to go and be on holiday. 1.5 days has gone in them trying to access the park. Will they come back? Of course not. You can't milk a cow that you don't feed. That's a potential area that we plan to deal with. Let me end with climate change. Something we are passionate about. The Honorable Nachimwero is our Shadow Minister for Environment. We call her the real Mama Mabira because the other Mama Mabira is a fake one. You remember that one? You see, Mabira Forest, when you're moving between that road, you see plenty of it. When you go on the inside there, it's been depleted. We burn for charcoal and so on. I don't know, these guys travel across the world. They know about things like renewable energy and so on, but they travel, go back home, and it's business as usual. That lake, Lake Victoria, there's a time we heard that some people had plots in the lake. The lake. And so somebody says, me, I have my 50 by 100, this part of the water. Another one has another. The other day, Sudhir was encroaching on the lake, reclaiming part of it for tourism and for development. All of these and many others are areas of concern that we must fix, that our government has got to fix. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you. It is possible. There are people who imagine Uganda cannot survive without Museveni. And so they don't get it that young men and women are challenging Mr. Museveni. They don't imagine a Uganda without Museveni. But you see, look at, I've enumerated to you part of the problems caused by this regime and how we must fix them. And so we must fight tooth and nail to unseat this regime. Because all these areas I have talked about, and there are very few, it's just that I've run out of time. I would have talked about many others. They are not going to get better for as long as Museveni is still in power. And now there's also this son of his who imagines Uganda is a kingdom, and so he's swinging his belly around the country saying, I am coming as a new president. It will not change because the preoccupation is how do we keep ourselves in power? All these areas will suffer. There will be no focus on them. Let's fight as hard as we possibly can. And by the way, there's no effort that is too small. Some of you might think that when I put up a post on Facebook, I am in this country and so on, it makes no impact. It does create an impact. You remember the free Bobi wine protests and so on? That's the power that you have wherever it is that you are. Bana yeberuba lubimbi, buli omu akwate enkumbi, afune wakabala. I tell people back home, I don't even like it that many times they're just there excited praising us and so on. We tell them, no, you join us. The first protest I participated in was the OTT protest. We held hands, Chagulanya and several others. And so as we were moving, there are these fellows coming to take selfies with us. There's one I even kicked. I said, look, you're just coming to take a selfie and then they get out of the way. And I'm like, you join us. He said, so Chagulanyi is not going to do it alone. No. It is your responsibility as much as it is his. And so sometimes I get baffled when people say, kakati, mutukole dewochi, and so on. When you invite them and say, okay, now let's go and protest, they will not show up. And then they are blaming Chagulanyi. When the Segirinyas and others, all these political prisoners, we held another protest with the members of parliament. And people were on their arcades and saying, and somehow we imagine that man is going to be our savior. No, he has got a part to play. Each of us, here and outside of this room, has got a part to play. So this business of, you see, you are leaders, you have not done enough, and yes, it's possible. There's areas we have got to fix. But which revolution has happened because of just a leader? No, it takes all of us, everybody, wherever it is that you are. Let's play our part, ladies and gentlemen. That is the only guarantee that we have. That is the only way we shall unseat Museveni. The only reason he fears Chagulanyi is because, I'm even bigger than this man in terms of size. I think I'm even heavier than him. Small as he is, the reason Museveni fears him is because of the people of Uganda who are saying we want change. And so those people of Uganda have got to wake up and realize that each of them has got a part to play. I thank you for listening to me. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure.
Joel Ssenyonyi ye mwogezi w'ekibiina kya National Unity Platform tuli mu Nup Diaspora Convention wano e Washington DC. Amuwulidde atubuulidde agabbi g'akwata mu Kosase, agabba ettaka, agabba ensimbi, agabba buli kimu, go tegataliza buli kimu gakibba. N'atubulira waatuuse era na biki ebigenda mu maaso. Joel Ssenyonyi agamba nti obuvunaanyizibwa okukyusa eggwanga lyaffe bwaffe nga bannayuganda, nti mumalamu amaanyi mumukwasa obusungu. Nalumu yakuba omusajja omugere mujjukira okukalakaasa kwa OTT. Bannayuganda bwe bayitibwa nti mujje twekalakaase baagala kwekubya serefi, naye tebasobola kwegatta ku beekalakaasa balumbe bajjako Mwami Museveni. Nti mmwe munaba nga temuli serious, bwe mutayige kuba serious mu bintu by'okujjako Mwami Museveni, ne mulowooza bijja kubanga byalwali buli kaseera nga mujja mwekubya serefi nga mudduka mugenda, temujja kuba mukoze omusango ogwa Nnaggumula. Mulina okukimanya nti Mwami Museveni alina okuggibwako, ayagala oba tayagala. mu ddembe oba mu kumpa n'empaka nga bannayuganda mmwe mukikoze era nga mulina kukozesa amaanyi gammwe, amaanyi g'abantu ye people power. Agamba bwe baba nga bayisa abantu kati kulagira kiragiro sawa ya kwekalakaasa kujjako mu Museveni musitukiremu, temudda mabega, temutendewalirwa, temudda kumalamu bannammwe maanyi, wabula mwegatte bwegasi ku mugendo ate awo olyoke lukoye paka nga Museveni aggiddwamu y'entebe. Tuli mu Washington DC, ggwanga lya America, gye mbagambye wali olukuŋŋaana lwa National Unity Platform ekituumiddwa NUP Diaspora Convention 2023. Yeetabyeko abantu bangi abavudde Uganda, abakulembeze ne ku mitendera gy'enjawulo. Kuliko abo abavudde mu diaspora mu America n'abavudde mu mawanga amalala ne bajja ne beegatta mu lukuŋŋaana luno okutema empenda Uganda yaffe egenda kuba etya nga Kyagulanyi amaze okulayira nga president. Bagamba nti essaawa yonna Kyagulanyi agenda kulayira era omulamu omukulu gwakujjako omwami Museveni ate Kyagulanyi atule mu ntebe. Bo bali convinced, bali steady, bakkiriza nti very soon Kyagulanyi Sentamu Robert Bobi Wine agenda kuba amaze okulindiggula gavumenti ya Museveni ekigo kiri kye bayita Sadida. Kati nabakoowola nti temuva ku ndaayi, musigale ku mulamwa. Mukimanye nti tulina okutereeza ensi yaffe, tulina okutereeza eggwanga lyaffe. Tunaabikola tutya nga tuwuliziganya ate nga tukola ekyo ekigwanidde kisobola okututaasa mu ggwanga lyaffe n'okulaba nga ate gavumenti ya Museveni efuuka lufumo nga tugisomako obusomi mu byafaayo. Olwo Uganda, bannayuganda beeyagala ate nabo bamanye nti nno eggwanga lyabwe balina kye baaliteekako ettaffaali. Okusinga lw'onoobeera mu nsi nga nawe tomanyi oba olina ettaffaali n'erimu ly'otadde ku ggwanga lyo, wabula nga wakolanga bitagwanidde, wakolanga bitalina mutwe n'amagulu, n'oleka ebyo ebyalaali ebirina amakulu. Olwo Ssenyonyi bye bigambo bibyo ebyo mubiwulidde bulungi era omulimu agukola bulungi, wali mukosase na byonna babikola ddala butuufu. Nsaba mbasibule, tugenda kuba tuddamu tuwaye. Mukama Katonda nsaba bankuumire. Mweraba.